Hey, soccer fans, welcome back to the Sons of a Pitch, an American soccer podcast. I am one of your hosts, Nick Pateras, joined by my good friend and fellow host, Mike Guglielmi. Mike, happy Mother's Day. How was the celebration this weekend with your family?
Hey, it was great. The wife got taken care of extremely well. Um, she had a great day, and I slaved away and did lots of dishes, did lots of cooking, did lots of ordering out and picking up food. Yeah, it was a busy day for me, relaxing day for the wife. That's the way it should be as a mother of four. So overall, a good day. How about yours?
Excellent. Yeah, my wife didn't get out of bed until about 2 o'clock that afternoon. So the kids and I did breakfast in bed and entertained them, and she just got to, sip her coffee in her new mug that her daughter picked out and just relax and watch all of her favorite TV shows while we took care of the rest of the house. So I'm
Nice.
glad to hear that both of our wives had a nice, relaxing Mother's Day, and happy Mother's Day to all the mothers out there. Belated Mother's Day, mothers, godmothers, stepmothers, all you mothers. Happy Mother's Day. So, we appreciate everyone tuning in after spending some quality time with their families, as much as you can when there's shelter in place orders out there. But the good news, Mike, the good news is that there is going to be live soccer coming back this weekend. It's going to be in Germany. It's the Bundesliga, but hopefully they've laid kind of a blueprint for the MLS, and it looks like the MLS is actually kind of following what the German league did: individual training, small group training, full teams, and then into games. And we're going to talk about the MLS's plans in the second half of the show. But first, we're going to start tonight's episode talking about some of the Americans abroad, a lot of the Americans in Germany. And if you listeners want to join our conversation, jump in on Twitter at SOP Soccer, on Facebook at Sons of a Pitch Soccer, or over on YouTube at Sons of a Pitch Soccer, our YouTube channel, where Mike is going to be doing some live shows this weekend talking
Yes.
German soccer.
Yep, we're going to do some lives. There's going to be live soccer, and it's not just the K League at 5 in the morning, which actually did well. A lot of viewership on YouTube for that one. But we're going to be live Saturday morning for sure for Dortmund and Schalke. So make sure to join us for that if you don't have FS1. And then Monday, I will be live again for Werder Bremen against Bayern Leverkusen at 1:30 Central Standard Time. That one's going to be on FS2. So that's one of the channels that's not as readily available out there for most fans. So if you don't have FS2 and you want to join us for some fun chatting about soccer and live soccer at that, make sure to join us on YouTube, and we'll be doing that.
Monday at 1:30. I thought you're working from home, Mike.
Hey, you know what? I'm just going to have to take a half day of PTO, or maybe, I don't know, work in the morning and then work after that game. I don't know. We're working remotely now. We can work at night if we want to.
Not trying to out anyone here. We're all making sacrifices for this.
Yeah. Yes.
Absolutely. Well, look forward to that, Mike. I'll see if I can call in and maybe give you a little content, give you a little banter. But as everyone knows, there are a lot of Americans over in Germany. So we've got Gio Reyna playing at Dortmund, Weston McKennie at Schalke. A big reason why Mike's doing that game. We've got Josh Sargent at Werder Bremen. Are there any Americans on Leverkusen? Do you
Not
recall
that I'm
offhand?
aware of.
All
Not
right,
that I'm aware
Leverkusen. It wouldn't surprise me if there was at least one in their academy,
of. Right.
if not, sitting on the bench somewhere. But we will be bringing you all that content. Mike will be walking you through it all. So that being said, let's get right into our discussion tonight. We wanted to talk USMNT. There has been a lot written and a lot said about Americans in Germany because the Bundesliga is opening up. But the first thing is, Mike, why do you think so many Americans end up in the German system, the Bundesliga system? What do you think is the allure? What do you think is the connection?
I'm really not 100% sure on it. I think partly has to do with Klinsmann and his time in charge of the USMNT. He kind of went after a lot of younger kids that were, living in Germany that might have had some type of tie connection to the United States national team, whether that be, a father that was abroad or, serving in the army or whatever. So I think that might have some type of influence to do with it as well. I think maybe it could be just building off of a good thing. You had that one experience with Christian Pulisic and how well he did going through the Borussia Dortmund system that that's kind of the pipeline for these kids to say, hey, that's the league I want to go to. It's the next step up. In my opinion, is probably a little bit below the league quality as a whole. Is probably a little bit below La Liga and Serie A. So I think they're kind of like that next step. And then you've got the La Liga, Serie A, and then the EPL. So I think that's kind of the way it's looked at. That, you know, that's probably the best way to go for these young Americans. Could have something to do with Klinsmann. That's kind of my thoughts. But overall, there's a lot of Americans in the Bundesliga, and it's great to see. Loving it. Not a lot of Americans in Serie A, not a lot of Americans in other leagues. There's a lot of them in the Bundesliga, so it's good to see that they're back in action.
I think it's part of the American connection, like you said, Klinsmann, but there's the American military presence in Germany, you know, notably the Ramstein Air Base. So you have a lot of kind of army brats born in Germany or raised in Germany who are exposed to the Bundesliga, to German soccer, to that whole culture, and it produces a lot of talent. So I think that's one reason why you see a lot of Americans going over there. Yeah, you can't argue against the Pulisic experience. But for me, I think the Bundesliga is, I don't want to say progressive, but at least open-minded, more so than Serie A and more so than the Premier League in bringing in players outside of the norm. Like, I still think there's a bit of a stereotype in Italy and England that Americans can't play soccer. You will notice that, yes, one of my lights just went out, so that's why the video is going to be a little crazy here. Mike's raising his eyebrow at me.
I'm like, wow, that was a big change.
Yeah, right? Let's see if I can adjust a little bit here. Here we go. All right. So, YouTube viewers, bear with us. But I really think that England and Italy, their domestic leagues, are still a little bit soccer racist, if you want to call it, and they don't like Americans for whatever reason. You know, despite the successes of name all these individual players, despite the USMNT, yeah, they've been down lately, but there's still talent there. There's still a lot of Americans who've played in Big Five leagues and have held their own. Like, you've got a guy like DeAndre Yedlin who's been with Newcastle forever. You know, he's got I don't know how many starts. And then if you look at the top talent in the United States, Donovan had the opportunity to play in the top 5 leagues. Dempsey was there. Tim Howard, Brad Guzan. You have guys who have had excellent careers there. You've had guys who've come up through development systems, have been loaned out. So even if you want to look at American players as an investment, maybe they'll never start for your top club, but you can at least develop them, loan them out, and sell them off to, say, a Dutch league or a Norwegian league, you know, 2 other leagues where you see a lot of Americans. You got Serginho Dest in Ajax. Like, these maybe are the exceptions to the rule, but if you have this many exceptions, it's starting to become the norm. So I think that's why you see a lot of American players in Germany, is because the Bundesliga ownership managers, they play a certain style and they play with an open mind that Americans really fit into. So that's kind of my take on everything over there. And kind of prepping for tonight's episode, I did go to a few websites. Yanks Abroad and USsoccerplayers.com have good lists of Americans playing outside of the United States, outside of MLS. And there's an older Goal.com article by Yves Gallercep that had like 100 Americans who are in the player pool, and you can kind of look at them. I think this article is from the fall, and it's like 100 U.S. international players. And really, you just search the internet enough. There's tons of discussion about this. So if you are interested in USMNT players abroad, you've got tons of resources, and we're happy to kind of conglomerate a little bit of that here tonight. So kind of what I was looking for, Mike, are like, who is the up-and-coming player? Who are some guys who can be an immediate impact in the United States national team? And then maybe like an intriguing player, someone who I kind of wanted to learn a little bit more about looking through here. So as far as like the up-and-comers, you can't not talk about Gio Reyna. He's with Borussia Dortmund right now, son of Claudio Reyna, American legend. He's already had a bunch of highlight reels over for Borussia Dortmund this season. Wonder goals, great moves. But he's only 17, Mike. So a lot of people say, doesn't matter, call him up. Do you think if you called up a 17-year-old to the U.S. senior team camp, or if you put him on your World Cup qualifying roster when he'll be about 19, 20 years old, Do you think he's being called up too soon? Because if the people who are saying call him up, they want him starting. They want him playing an hour a game at least. In my opinion, if you're going to call this guy up, call him up, work him out with the camp, get him a taste of senior team training, but maybe you don't put him on your qualifying roster. What do you think?
Hey, you know what? If the guy's producing, if he's playing well enough that he can do it in the Bundesliga, put him on the team. What has this team proven? What has this U.S. men's national team done lately other than a couple friendly victories here and there? Nations League kind of lose to Canada, then come back and beat Canada and, get lucky through goal differential to qualify for the Nations League semifinals and finals. Put this kid on. Let's see what he can do. If he's doing it at a stage like Borussia Dortmund, he could do it on a stage like a U.S. national team game, especially something like the coronavirus hiatus that we've had could help with that, because you put this kid in, if he's doing a U.S. national team game, let's say we're, 6 months down the road from something like that, it might be behind closed doors. So if it's behind closed doors and it's kind of taking away that fright that, playing in the big time atmosphere of a game, an international game that you might have, playing at the Netherlands with 80,000 people, in orange, right? There's a little bit of a difference. So maybe that helps with his progression. I don't know. If he can do it on that stage, my thought is let's see what he can do with the U.S. national team. You're not talking about a team like Spain. You're not talking about a team like France. You're not talking about a team like Italy. You're talking about the United States men's national team, who did not qualify for the last World Cup. Put him out there and see what he can do.
We know that, Mike. Stop saying it again.
On the Bundesliga stage, right? I mean, look, if the kid's doing it in MLS, that's one thing. The kid's doing it for one of the better clubs in the Bundesliga, that's a whole nother thing. So that's my take on it.
I gotcha. Now, he's a midfielder, though, and we know the U.S. is pretty deep at midfield right now.
Yep.
Assuming that Michael Bradley is going to continue to get some call-ups, all the way down to guys like Tim Weah and Gio Reyna, who are these, I don't even know if you want to call them the next crop. A lot of people consider them the next crop, that they're going to be your stars in the 2026 World Cup cycle, not the 2022 World Cup cycle. So Gio Reyna is going to have a lot of guys ahead of him that he's going to have to beat out. But like you said, he's playing for one of the top clubs in one of the top leagues and is doing it pretty well. Do you think there's going to be some sort of sophomore slump with him? Do you see that in soccer players usually?
There could be. I think we need to get away from the mindset of, well, he's 17 and there's, these guys that are 20 and there's these guys that are 24 and then there's these guys that are 28 and then you got the veterans that are 32. Let's give all these guys different shots based off. Let's get rid of that. The mindset needs to be who's going to produce, make it all about productivity. If you're playing well, you're starting. If you're training well, you're starting. Let's make it about the results on the field. I don't care who's ahead of him, who's 21, who's 24, if he's 17. If he's showing off better in the training field and then he's showing better in games, whether that's league games and or national team call-ups, depending on the situation, that's where you got to go. You got to make this competition-based and have guys really fight for it, because that's one of the things that people have said about the U.S. national team. They're like, they're kind of, those overpaid millionaires, right? They kind of was Alexi Lalas, the tattooed millionaires and
one of the great quotes
in
U.S. soccer history.
Yeah. It's not about that. Like, get out there, hustle, grind, work on it, put your nose to the ground, and let's see what you've got, and get back to that. And maybe it starts there, because I'll tell you, if I'm 23, 24, and it's my turn, and some little 17-year-old kid shows up and takes my starting job, I'm going to be pissed, and you're going to get the best out of me. So, maybe that's what some of these other guys need. I don't know, but that's where I'm going if I'm coaching the team.
Well put, Mike. Well put. Just going through this, the Bundesliga website also has a webpage listing all the Americans who are playing in the Bundesliga. So another great another great source of info for everyone. Everyone knows Ulysses Llanes, another American who's recently promoted to Wolfsburg first team. So make sure you're watching Wolfsburg. They've got a couple other Americans on there. Also, Michael Edwards playing for them. One of the other names that has kind of come up recently, let me go back and find it here, Chris Richards. He has 22 appearances for Bayern Munich's reserve team in the German third division. They're currently sitting seventh place in the table, but it's Bayern Munich's third division team. If they had players who were any good, they're either selling them or promoting them. So I'm not surprised that a reserve team for a big club like that isn't, competing for victories all the time. He's only 19. He's a right back. To me, he kind of falls in that same Gio Reyna category. Like, is it too young? Is he too young to compete? Especially when you got guys like Serginho Dest, Reggie Cannon, who are already kind of solidifying their position. And then you also look at another defender, John Brooks, who is in the Bundesliga and playing for, where are my notes here? Where's John? Wolfsburg. Thank you. So it's kind of funny to think, Mike, that the U.S. is actually pretty deep in the midfield and along the back line, but we still don't know who the four starters are along the back line. We still don't know who the four midfielders are going to be, or the five, or whatever formation Berhalter wants to use. We've just got a bunch of guys in the pool right now, and I think that's the next step, is figure out who we want to be the starters and who we want to bring along as reserve players. And then finally, who's going to be the last two or three guys on the roster who are there to learn and look towards the future? Because I think that's how you need to construct an international roster. You can't just have 25 or 23 guys who are going to win right now. You need to have a couple three who are going to be that kind of institutional memory, be that leadership experience vet the next World Cup cycle. That's what I'm thinking. Do you have any other kind of players overseas that you're thinking of? German league, Bundesliga, otherwise?
Well, I mean, most of them are going to be from the Bundesliga, but there's just so much young talent that's over in Europe right now. I mean, it's just I keep going down this list, and I mean, it's just tons and tons of talent. We've got to do better. These kids, they've got the talent, obviously, to be playing in top leagues like the Bundesliga, like the Eredivisie. Why in the hell are we struggling? What does that come down to? I think, honestly, that comes down to more of a coaching thing. That comes down to more of a GM thing. Who's picking these players? Who's bringing them through the systems? That's the issue. I mean, look at this list from Yves Gallerset. It's just nuts. I mean, Pulisic, right? You got McKinney, Zach Steffen, John Brooks, Josh Sargent, Tim Way.
Oh, yeah. We glossed over all those big names because we figured they'll be there.
Serginho Dest, Alex Menendez, Aaron Long, Matt Mazaga, Sebastian Soto at Hanover 96, DeAndre Yedlin from Newcastle, Horvath at Club Brugge, Gloser at Hanover 96, Pomical, Areola. I mean, there's so much talent on this team. Why are we struggling against teams like Panama and Canada? Why? That's got to be – there's a bigger issue.
You want me to offer an answer?
Let's hear it.
I think that one of the easier answers to give to that is because it's the system and the coaching. Like, Berhalter has a system in place that takes time, that takes certain kinds of players. That's why you've got 32-year-old Michael Bradley. That's why you've got can't get out of MLS Will Trapp, who are still getting starts, because it's a system. That's why Greg Berhalter still believes Giazzi Zardes is the best striker we have, because he fits the system. Now, I'm a big Zardes fan, but there's clearly better players out there in the American player pool. So I think that's the first thing you have to look at. And we're taking two steps back here with this discussion right now, because this was talked about when they hired Berhalter, is do we need a system that can take us better than our talent? But now the problem is, at least in the 2026 World Cup cycle, we have so much better talent. We're going to have to rethink it. So I don't know when Berhalter's contract's up, but they might let him go at the end of 2022 and then bring in, I don't know, maybe I'll just throw a name out there, Tom Ramos to go ahead and coach the U.S. national team. We'll see how he does in Houston, a guy who's familiar, though, with the United States structure.
Right.
They could completely change it depending on the talent that they have after the 2022 cycle. So that's kind of a short-term, long-term speculation there, Mike. But yeah, it's probably just the current USSF people, the current U.S. soccer people, just don't know how to evaluate this talent right now. They don't know what they have because there's so many players who could come in. There was a huge talent gap. There was a huge development void behind the kind of the Michael Bradley generation, if you want to call it that everyone's like, okay, Pulisic and Adams will handle it. And clearly the two of them just couldn't do it. Not
Right.
a knock against them, but two guys does not a team make.
Nope, for sure. 100%. I mean, that's something that you have to realize with soccer, and most soccer fans, at least the knowledgeable ones, understand that, is you need more than just the 1-2 guys. You need, you need 5, 6, 7. You need a good cohesive unit. There's a reason why there's successful teams that don't have a ton of stars. They've got a good team unit that plays well, that plays great under a system, and has those 2 or 3 guys that can really kill you. So enough of that. I think we could sit here and talk all day long about when, Berhalter, is he the right guy? Is he not the right guy? Should he get fired? Should he not get fired? That's for a whole nother conversation. I think the key is focusing on these kids that are coming up. Hopefully they get the right development. And I think that's what's lacking is the U.S. fan is kind of, they're not so confident in that system. And that's an issue.
Absolutely. There was a couple other just not so much Bundesliga players, but a couple other USMNT players that I kind of had on my radar that I wanted to learn a little bit about. One of them is Tyler Boyd, because he was billed as kind of like he's a striker who could, really make an impact for the U.S. or at least kind of bridge Josie Altidore to Josh Sargent. While Sargent gets a little more experience, maybe builds up his body a little bit more, learns kind of what Berhalter wants to do. Who could be that bridge? Who can score goals for the U.S. until Sargent gets 100%? Or, if he gets released from his club to play in some of these international games. Tyler Boyd was kind of the guy who could fill that gap. I just don't see it, though, Mike. And that's why I wanted to learn more about him. He recently made a move to Besiktas over in Turkey. To me, I think the Turkish league is really overrated. I don't know. There's 3 clubs, Fenerbahce, Besiktas, and I forget the third one. Really, it's a 3-club league. And then the guys who come out of the Turkish league really don't do well against higher competition, at least historically. And maybe that's the Everton fan in me, having picked up a couple guys from the Turkish league who have fallen flat on their face in the Premier League. But I just don't see Tyler Boyd developing over there, and I don't see him even doing well. Like, he's only had 14 appearances, 8 starts, but no goals for Besiktas in their regular season. I think he netted 1 or 2 in some either international or some European continental play or something else other than their league play. But you know what? 0 goals in 14 league appearances is not the kind of guy that I figure is going to really stand out for the USMNT. Additionally, he's 25 right now, so this is his kind of one World Cup cycle that he's got. And then he's competing with guys like Sargent, Pulisic, if they put him out on the wing, Tim Weah, and here's another name let's throw out there, De La Fuente, who's another 19, 20-year-old kid who's with Barcelona's B team right now and who's having a fairly good run with them. I don't think there's going to be a spot for an average to a little above average Tyler Boyd going forward.
Probably not. I think you're right. A lot of these players that go to Turkey, kind of the Turkish league. I know we spoke with, I think his name was Joe Samuelson of Joseph Samuelson there of Colorado Rapids. He was talking about the Russian league is kind of like where creative midfielders kind of go to die. And, from what I've noticed is that Turkish league is guys just kind of go there to die. I mean, you look at some of these players and a lot one guy that stands out in my mind is Kyle Larin from the Canadian men's national team that was with Orlando City. You know, he had played a few great years, #1 overall pick with MLS. He goes over to Besiktas and he's just disappeared. I mean, he's gotten some starts. He's not doing much. He's fallen off the radar of the Canadian men's national team, and I think that's partly because of Alphonso Davies and Jonathan David, who are taking, world-type headlines. But it's a 3-team league. You've got Besiktas, and then the other team that you forgot to mention was Galatasaray or or however the hell you say it. So when there's not much competition in those leagues, and I think he kind of came onto the system way too fast, right? I remember talking about it with you, Nick, when we were doing some, talking about that USA-Canada game. We're like, who is this guy? Like, where'd this guy come from? Never heard of him before. Who is this guy? And then, he comes on and he has a couple good games, and you're like, oh, man, he's making us look bad. And then all of a sudden he disappears again. So, what is he? There's way too much depth in the midfield. But the one thing I will say, like, about the Conrad de la Fuente from Barcelona, the thing that I hate the most is a lot of fans will get caught up in the fact that he's playing for Barcelona B, right? Oh, man, this kid must be the next best thing in the world because he's playing at Barcelona. Now, a lot of things go into that. Barcelona's not signing a bunch of scrubs. They're not, there's obviously something to that, but I think people kind of put those expectations so far up there because he's playing for Barcelona, he's in the Barcelona system, that 9 times out of 10, these guys falter and they fall flat on their face because of that hype. What I want to see is what is the hype about? I want to see what he does on the field. Show me what this guy's doing in games. How is his ball handling skills? How is his passing? What type of service is he giving on from the flanks if he's a winger? I want to see that kind of stuff. Not the guy's from Barcelona. And I think a lot of fans in the U.S. system, not your diehards. Your diehards are smarter than that. But most of your casual national team fans, which there's not a ton of, it's kind of like an oxymoron, right? Because usually it's diehards are the ones that are following the national team. But those kind of mid-range folks, they're going to be, oh, this guy plays for Barcelona. He's going to be like, Lionel Messi. He's going to come in, he's going to score 4 goals in a game, and he's going to shoot this amazing free kick. And, oh, wait a minute. He's not like that. So I think sometimes those expectations can kind of screw people. But, let's be easy on the kid. Give him some time. He's young. Same thing with, we were just talking about him, Gio Reyna, right? He blew up onto the scene, doing extremely well. If he comes into the U.S. national team and he has a couple duds of games, let's just give him a little bit of time, okay? Kid's 17 years old. So I think patience is something that needs to be stressed as long as it's in the right system with the right coaching staff and the right plans are being worked out. But, that's my thoughts on Tyler Boyd, the Turkish league, and the young up-and-coming star De La Fuente, all in one.
I like it, Mike. I like the takes. And just to kind of wrap it up, here's a list of Americans that have played over in Turkey. Freddie Adu and Josie Altidore back in 2011.
Hey, all right.
Your guy Josie.
Hey.
I think he was probably coming back from an injury. I think that's safe to say most seasons. Tyler Boyd, obviously. Maurice Edu played in 2013 over there. And again, I think from Mo Edu, if I remember an interview I heard with him, like he was coming back from an injury and just went to go get some game experience, some pro level experience over in Turkey before making a move to another bigger European league or coming back to the U.S.
Yeah, I mean, I followed Maurice Edu because I got to know him pretty well. And, so being a TFC guy, and I actually was, hanging out with the guy at that first training camp. And, when he went over to Rangers, I remember his time there at Rangers until the financial crisis over there and all their crap that they went through. Then he went back over to Philadelphia Union. So I don't even remember that time in Turkey. So it must have been something like an injury, quick little loan or something to get him back in shape.
Yeah, spent a year with Bursaspor in 2013. Last couple Americans, Brad Friedel played for Galatasaray in 95 and 96.
Wow.
So that was probably how he broke into kind of the major European scenes, was playing a year or two over there. And then finally, Jermaine Jones, if you remember him, formerly New England Revolution, formerly USMNT, Jermaine Jones played with Besiktas in 2014. So that's kind of your list of Americans who have played in Turkey, according to Wikipedia, for whatever that is worth. The one last thing that I just kind of want to mention about Americans abroad. I mean, we see a lot of Americans in the Bundesliga. We talked about that connection. We see a lot of Americans in kind of the Nordic, Scandinavian countries, Denmark, Norway, playing over there, I guess, because those leagues, how they scout, maybe they like the American style, maybe they like the American player. Personally, I'm wondering why there aren't more Americans in the Greek league. And I saw you smile right before I said it, Mike, so you knew exactly where I was going. Like, there's only one American in the Greek league. His name's, I can barely pronounce it, and I apologize for this, Gboli Ariyibi. He plays for Panetolikos FC from central Greece there. He actually is like of Nigerian and English descent, but went playing for them and did some youth work with the United States. So that's why he's kind of tied to the U.S. now. But he's the only American playing in the Greek league. And if you look at the Greek league, yeah, economically it's in shambles. So maybe that's why they're not over there. But it could be another good gateway into some of the middle to upper tier European leagues, especially if you end up on a team like Olympiacos, like Panathinaikos. I'm trying to think of the other third big team, AEK Athens. Every now and then competes for a title there. But those guys go to Champions League. Like the Greeks have one or two teams that get into the Champions League every year, so you can get noticed if you want. So that's kind of my last thought on everything Yanks abroad, Americans in Europe type of situation. So let's transition. We'll hear a quick word from our sponsors. We're going to come back with some MLS headlines, as well as look at what MLS reopening looks like right after this.
Hey, everybody. We're back from our halftime break. Thank you to our sponsors, Donovan Food Brokerage and Nice Premium Iceland Pure Spring Water, for supporting us even through these tough times, to continue to let us grow. Also, to our listeners, thank you very much for your ears and letting us invade your podcast, however you do it, your phone, whatever. Thanks for sticking with us through this tough time of not a lot of sports information as well. So speaking of that, there was some interesting news about MLS and how they possibly might return from their COVID-19 break. So a lot of different things are up in the air right now, especially because the different governments, the local governments, state governments, and all these different guidelines that come into play. So recently, some teams are returning to individual training. So for example, most recently today, Toronto FC, my beloved Toronto FC, were able to start training again. And the difference in Canada was Montreal was not allowed to start training again. So, their government and breakdown there in Quebec was a little bit different. And they said, nope, you're not, we're not going to sign a special order to allow you to go training. So it's all dependent on the different markets. So that kind of puts a spin onto how MLS is going to get back into play, going forward. So there's some talk about different formats, right? Because obviously you're not going to be able to have a type of, just based off the different laws and executive orders and all these things that are out there, you're not going to be able to have free-flowing travel between Toronto and New York and Kansas City to Chicago. It's going to be different. All of these different places have these different guidelines in place. So the talk is, at this point, it's saying, well, maybe doing some type of like neutral venue or having kind of like a regional base for some of these clubs. So having, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 different clubs in one place like Kansas City, another 10 in Orlando, another 10 in Utah, however that gets played out. So it was an interesting article that kind of broke down all of these different things. What do we know? What about testing? When competitive matches resume? What are they going to look like? I think the answer to that last question is there's no doubt it's going to be behind closed doors. I think this is something that MLS is one of the leagues that's in the worst situation for. MLB, they can survive behind closed doors for probably for a couple seasons. They'd be fine. You've got NFL, they can play behind closed doors. They'll be okay. They've got these TV deals and whatnot. MLS, not so much. It's not going to be, they can't play 2 seasons behind closed doors and still financially be viable. So I think that kind of plays into the decision of how do we get things back, right? So there's that. what does it look like? To me, I think that there's pressure to get the sports to resume, right? You're starting to see, it's funny, it's kind of like a domino effect. It started in the beginning of this process with the NBA. The NBA came out that one day after Rudy Gobert and the other Utah Jazz guy got tested positive for coronavirus. They said, that's it. It's canceled. And then the next day, NHL followed suit, MLS followed suit, MLB followed suit. It's kind of like this domino effect. Well, now we're seeing the opposite effect, especially with the world sports situation, and not necessarily the U.S. sports situation, because the NFL, the NBA, the NHL, all those, they're different. But you're seeing these German Bundesliga coming back. The Korean K-League is back behind closed doors. You're starting to get soccer throughout the world coming back. Premier League is in talks to be June, beginning of June, that they're coming back. So I think there's a little bit of pressure on MLS with that I think they can't just say, well, we're not going to come back. These other leagues are going to come back, but we're not going to come back because of this or that or whatever. They need to do something. So I expect to see probably I'm thinking more around the baseball timeline. July or so. A thing got passed today with the MLB owners got together and decided that they're gonna, hopefully it'll get passed through the players union. But they're looking at returning July 4th weekend. I could see maybe something like that for MLS. Nick, what are your thoughts and what did you take from that article?
Sure. Wow, that's kind of cool to think MLB come back on the 4th of July. I mean, the marketing, America's pastime on America's birthday, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And I think that's something that MLS would have to take into account too. They're like, okay, are we going to start games the same weekend as another major sport? Like, would you want to have your first MLS game the same time the Yankees have first pitch? Like, I don't know who you're fighting for with ratings there, but it might not be a good idea. So that might
come
into
the
play.
Week before.
Yeah, right. Do it the week before, and then you'll get everybody in. Like, wait to hear what MLB's plan is, and then do yours the week before. Totally.
Right.
Do the old Price is Right. $1. Coming right underneath them. But no, it's cool to think that the MLS does have this plan, and I think we mentioned it in the first half of the show that everyone's kind of following the Bundesliga plan, right? Where you get a plan in place for how you're going to train, how you're going to monitor the health of everyone that comes in and out of these training areas. You do individual training, then you do small group training, then you get full team exercises, and then after a couple weeks of that, you can get into regular game scenarios. What to me is very cool and what I think is unique to American sports is the tournament aspect of this. That they're saying that, okay, well, we can't have a full season, and I don't know if it's a good idea to just do a shortened season and then have the playoffs decided as to, the top 7 or 8 seeds or the top 7 seeds based on, a 20-game season, 15-game season or whatever. So this mini tournament idea I think is really cool where you send, 8 teams or so to 4 different cities. They play in a little regional tournament, and then they take the top 4 teams from each tournament, and there's your playoffs. I think it's fair in the sense that everyone gets to play each other and compete for a top spot. You still are going to get your regular MLS playoffs, and you can abide by, say, the local jurisdiction, the local state laws based on, what's open and following the coronavirus kind of protective plans or whatever you want to call them. I think it'd be kind of fun to see, like an all MLS tournament. But at the same time, it's going to go down in history as like the one-off season, right? We're never going to get it back or anything like that. So to me, that's really fun. The other thing I was thinking about too, Mike, is some other articles that came out about the MLS pay cuts. And I don't know if you want to jump into that right now or if you want to stay a little bit more about bringing the teams back. Because I think it's going to be a gradual thing. And look, if they just started individual training sessions this week, then you're looking at end of June at the earliest for some live games. I mean, was that your thought of the time frame as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you're only having individual training, you need to have, when you have a hiatus like this of two plus months, there has to be a small training camp or preseason to get these guys back into Match Fitness, right? So you're talking a minimum of probably 2 to 3 weeks once they're group training again and fully together. So, the fact that we don't have all teams back individual training at this point, I'm thinking you're looking at July. But that's,
I just saw Minnesota get the okay today.
Okay, nice. So, right, so there's TFC, there's Minnesota, and other teams. They'll start feeling the pressure, right? And we all know how this stuff works. You start feeling the pressure, you start talking to people, other people start talking to other people, and then all of a sudden it's magic, right? So I think you'll start to see all these other teams following suit, with the exception of maybe like NYCFC and New York Red Bull, because they're in the epicenter of this situation, which even the Governor Cuomo came out today and said, hey, we are starting to focus on reopening now, because it is now the downturn has started. So it's a little bit different than Illinois, where the governor says, well, we're just going to sit back and wait for a vaccine for another year or 2 years.
Yeah, right. I was just going to say the Chicago Fire are probably at the biggest disadvantage.
They really are.
Illinois' Governor Pritzker has taken probably the most conservative approach, to the point, like you said, where he's not even going to consider reopening until there's a vaccine. Right. Or I think he put out like a 4 or 5 phase plan, and he's like, we're not even in phase 2 yet. Like Illinois hasn't even seen supposedly a downturn in cases or anything like that, despite evidence on both sides of it.
They have. Illinois has started the downturn in cases, but he's not. He won't go there. And at least Cuomo at least went there today, and we'll start to see a bit of a reopening. But I think you're going to see these epicenters like New York, I wouldn't put Chicago as an epicenter, but New York,
Seattle maybe,
Seattle probably, right? So those type of places, you're going to have a little bit different of an outlook. But things will get done. I think we're moving in the right direction. There's too much pressure to get this stuff back, because people are missing, people are missing sports, and I think we'll get there. So let's talk a little bit about the pay cuts and whatnot. You were referencing some information about a possible 20% pay cut. What do you know about that?
There's an ESPN article that I was reading, and this is a common thing that all these sports leagues around the world are doing, is that they're negotiating with their players' unions about reduced salaries. I know there's a huge debate going on in Major League Baseball because of the owners saying we're going to cut everyone's salaries, and the players just thought they were going to get prorated, but Major League Baseball owners said no, we're slashing them by a percentage. We're not prorating it for the season. So that kind of is what's going on with Major League Baseball. MLS is going along those same lines as well, where they originally had some plan where it's like, okay, we're cutting salaries for every player who's making more than $100,000 in half. Like, they were just going to cut those players' salaries in half. Now the proposal that is actually going to the MLS Players Association is a 20% pay cut across the board. All salaries are going to be cut 20%. Additionally, they're looking at cutting other sorts of revenue streams or expenses. That is, I didn't see the details on that in the article, but I would imagine it has to do with either advertising spending or facility spending, or your game and TAM. Like, you're not going to be able to go out and spend all this money on buying and selling players, that there's going to be some sort of reduction on that. That's kind of my take on it. I think it's interesting, you've had owners like Arthur Blank come in and say, we're going to continue to pay all of our hourly employees. And I think maybe 1 or 2 other owners have done that as well. Or maybe I'm thinking of the NFL and MLB side of things. But for MLS, when, your biggest revenue is your sum, is your Soccer United marketing and some of these TV rights, it's really interesting to think that you're just going to cut player salaries when you can still be getting in this money from marketing. Like, I don't know if it's going to sit well with the players' union.
Well, a lot of it is going to be ticket revenue for MLS. That's a huge part of it, because the revenue levels are so low. I think it kind of boils down to, if you have more of your television marketing, more of your, other outside aspects coming in on it. If you've got $1 billion coming in from these other things, you've got, 20%, a lower number of ticket revenue. So, for sure. So when you have these bigger portions, the ticket sales, they're not going to be that big of an effect, right? So like Premier League, these other leagues that are out there, it's a little different. When you're with MLS, the ticket revenue is still a big portion of the equation. So I think that is affecting these teams. They kind of have to step back too. I mean, you're looking at the overall. Look at how you have 25 million people here in the United States that have gotten unemployment now, filed for unemployment. There's a large portion of people that are struggling right now that have absolutely nothing because their jobs are done. Well, guess what? I'm an essential worker. Nick, you're an essential worker as well. If it came to that, would I be happy about it? No, nobody's happy about a pay cut. Would I take it over losing my job? Absolutely. Now, are these guys going to lose their job? Are they going to not have a contract? No, there's different things in play. But overall, it needs to be looked at as, hey, I'm still doing okay. I'm making money. I've got money here for my family. Let's do the right thing here and make sure this all works out well. So
yeah. Absolutely. And I guess the other thing, too, is you think about that, like how many millions of Americans are affected from an economic standpoint when the league reopens. And again, I agree with you. First, it's going to be games without fans, closed-door games. And then they're going to slowly bring in small crowds and this and that, maybe restrict tailgating or just, gate entry. That's it. But the fact is, these people, the Americans don't have the expendable income like they did. So even if you open up gates, even if you open up the games, how many people are going to say, dude, I just got back to pay my mortgage. I'm not going to go blow a couple $100 on a soccer game right now. I mean, the casual fans aren't going to be turning up to stadiums around the country, I think, for a while, if not until next season. So hopefully the MLS can do a lot more broadcasting, advertising, TV type stuff where they can open up some revenue streams or expand the traditional advertising revenue streams to offset some of that cash. But yeah, I think ticket sales are going to be way down for this entire season. I mean, unless you're Atlanta and Seattle, those might be the only two exceptions now, so that would be the only thing I could think of, Mike. So let's let me know what you think. And then we can and then we'll see like what MLS ends up doing, because I'm kind of curious to see if they're going to go through with this mini tournament thing. I don't know if that's part of the proposal to the Players Association or not, or if it's just the pay cut.
I mean, you're going to have a difference here, Nick. I mean, you say, okay, Seattle, Atlanta, those are going to be your exceptions. Well, I think everybody's going to be an exception, because not only are you going to have people who are struggling financially that are going to say, well, I'm not going out to these games because I just barely paid my mortgage. But you also have these guys who are, there's a portion of the population that's going to be afraid to go to a sports event with a large gathering of people. I mean, Nick, when you go outside now, everyone's wearing a mask. If you don't have your mask on in your car, people look at you weird. Okay, so if you go to the sports stadium to be sitting, in between two different people, with all this stuff, there is a mental effect to this entire thing. As much as you want to either deny it or accept it, there's going to be a mental aspect to this as well. So I think it's going to have an effect on the amount of fans that get in, ticket sales, all that. There's going to be a financial impact on this. The players have to accept something. It's just the way it's going to be. If the team is not making as much money, they can't spend as much money if you want that entity to survive. So there's going to be different things at play. Let's just come to a good agreement and let's make this whole thing successful.
Absolutely. Like you said, if the entity is going to survive, and that entity is Major League Soccer, it's the single entity, and it's going to have to take revenues from some of the bigger clubs, redisperse it to some of the smaller clubs just to offset those losses, and we'll see what happens. Or clubs, maybe not bigger and smaller, but clubs who have been least impacted to those who have been most impacted, and they'll have to redistribute it around a little bit, again, to keep this league afloat. The one other thing I want to mention, Mike, is, this is some news that I missed from about a couple months ago. I didn't realize Benny Feilhaber retired. Sporting Kansas City player, played for the U.S. national team, played all around. His highlight, I mean, he was on the 2010 World Cup squad, won an MLS Cup in 2013, won a couple Open Cups in 15 and 17 with Sporting Kansas City. Sporting Kansas City's been my Western Conference team. I didn't even hear that Benny Feilhaber had retired. I'm assuming he's going to go focus on his very popular podcast and take that to the next level. But it was always fun watching him play, and that's just some news that kind of hit me as a fan of his for a while. That's everything I wanted to get through in this episode, Mike. Tell us what else is on your mind. What did you notice, and then go ahead and bring us home.
Yeah, I didn't know that this was gonna. I didn't know about Benny Feilhaber. I really didn't. I thought it was just he just kept playing. But no, that's pretty much it. I mean, there's different talks about coming back to that mini tournament like you had talked about. But look, we're still a ways away from all this, and at least we have a little bit of soccer. The Bundesliga coming back this weekend, so make sure to find us on YouTube. If you have not done so already, and we'll be live for that. It'll definitely be myself. Maybe we'll find a way to get Nick in there. I don't know if we'll be able to do that or not. But anyways, fans, thank you for listening to us. We're going to cut this episode just a tad bit short. I know we're probably only around 45, 50 minutes. But damn it, it's coronavirus, and we've got nothing to talk about. So enjoy the rest of your time, and we will be back at you guys next week with some more content after our lives, and maybe we'll talk a little bit about those lives in Bundesliga games as well. So thanks for joining us. We'll talk to you guys soon.